Hi everyone, and welcome to my video on using Stampin' Up! Soft Pastels, which are some chalks that are in the annual catalog. I just love using these for some simple techniques that I'm going to show you today, and they come in colors of Daffodil Delight, Mango Melody, Poppy Parade, Gorgeous Grape, Coastal Cabana, Mossy Meadow, Granny Apple Green, and Pacific Point. So you've got a wide variety of beautiful bright colors that you can use on projects. So today I'm starting with a piece of shimmery white cardstock for this first technique, and it's got a pretty finish and it does well when adding a little bit of moisture to it. So I'm using this Nature's Harvest stamp set, that coneflower image there, and so I'm going to start off by inking up that image with a jet black StazOn ink because I'm going to be using a blender pen on part of this image, and I don't want the black ink to smear. And this is a stay fast ink and is good for when you're watercoloring or using some kind of moisture on your images to color. So I inked that stamp very well with that pad, and I'm just going to center it and press it onto the shimmery white cardstock. So once I pull that up, we're going to have our image ready to go. I just love those flowers from the Nature's Harvest stamp set. And so I'm going to get my pastels in, and I'm going to show you a very simple technique to start with. I'm taking the Daffodil Delight marker, and the little corners of the edge are great for coloring with this. And so I'm just doing some tiny brush strokes on that small little bloom there, just to give it a little bit of color. And you can see they're little short little strokes. You can leave it just like that with some subtle color, or you can take a sponge dauber and just kind of blend it all in, blend the color in, and it really makes it soft looking and really pretty. So that's just one way to use these soft pastels. And so I have a very light, subtle color there on that little bud. So now let's try something different. I am going to use Poppy Parade, and I'm going to just brush some strokes over these larger blooms. And you can just see I'm just drawing small little lines there that I'm going to eventually blend together. But I want to add another color to give some variation. Now these particular pastels blend very well together whether you're using a blender pen or not. You can always use a tissue or a sponge dauber to blend the colors, but I'm going to show you today how I'm going to use a blender pen. Now I have the Mango Melody, and I'm coming down just right next to that Poppy Parade, and you can even overlap these colors and it'll be just fine. So I'm getting all of those petals colored with just some short little brush strokes. Now while that's pretty in and of itself, I'm going to pull in a blender pen, and it's double-sided, the same on both ends, and it's got a little clear tip that has a little bit of liquid in there, special liquid that blends colors well. And I'm scribbling off to make sure there's no residual color from another project. And now I'm just going to take and rub the pastel chalks together and blend those to color those flowers. And you can see how it makes it even more bold and vibrant once that little bit of liquid there in the blender pen blends those colors together. So let's go ahead and do the other petals. And I'm just bringing it down to the end, shaking off a little bit of excess chalk, and I'm going to finish these out. I wanted to give it like a gradient color with the Poppy Parade and Mango Melody, and that's what I accomplished with this particular technique. Okay, so finishing off those petals, And then I am going to just scribble on a piece of scrap paper to get the color off. And then you can use it again on another color. Now this side I had used already for some petals and stems. No, so for some stems and leaves, I'm sorry. So I'm going to use the direct to the pastel, which is the mossy meadow color. And I'm just rubbing my blender pen on the pastel and picking up the color. This is another technique you can use to apply the color. It's much more subtle, but you can color several layers to get an intensified color like I did here. Now I'm cleaning that off, and I've got all of that ready to go, but I still have the centers of the flowers, and I want a brown look. And so while I could probably mix some colors, I decided to just use the crumb cake Stampin' blends to give those centers a color. This just wanted to show you that you can mix your mediums of color when you're working on a project, and it will look just fine. Okay, so there it's finished now, and I'm going to add another little touch that I like to do. I'm taking the Coastal Cabana chalk, and I'm going around the image and just putting a few little strokes there, adding just a slight shading of color, and then I'm going to take my finger and blend that in, and that just kind of gives it a shadow in the background, a pretty color that keeps the flower from looking like it's just floating in midair. It kind of grounds it a bit, and this is something I like to do with these pastels. Again, that's the Coastal Cabana chalk that I use the soft pastels to put some color around. And then if you want to blend it even more, you can take your sponge dauber and just go around the silhouette of the image. And to me, this really makes a difference and kind of makes the image pop out just a little bit more. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a finished card that I used with this same image. So I have this card here that I chose using a bumblebee base because I thought that would go well with the Mango Melody flowers, and then I've got Poppy Parade to go with that. I chose some ribbon and twine, and then I fussy cut the sentiment Sending Healing Thoughts from that longer sentiment just to use on the front, and I added some rhinestones that I colored with a Poppy Parade Stampin' blend. So you can make some really pretty cards with these techniques and with these soft pastels. So now we're going to set things aside, and we're going to do another project with a different technique. This one I'm just going to do a background. I have basic white in a square, and I'm going to apply the pastels directly to the paper. I'm starting with Coastal Cabana, and I'm just going to scribble that along the top. So this is going to simulate like a horizon. So right now I'm creating the sky, and it's very easy to do, and no two horizons look alike, which is really fun. So I'm blending the Pacific Point with the Coastal Cabana. You can overlap the colors. And right here you can see the individual strokes of the pastel, but I'm going to switch that up here in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and add a little bit more there. I see that I wanted some more of that Coastal Cabana. And now I'm going to take Mango Melody, and I'm going to start a little bit overlapping on that Coastal Cabana, and this is to simulate the sunset. So I'm going to be using Mango Melody here, and I'm also going to pick up a little bit darker shade with the Poppy Parade. Again, notice how I'm just using the very edge of the pastel to put down the color. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a sponge dauber, and use this blue-green one for the sky, and you can see how that just makes a beautiful, soft, subtle color there for the sky, and it just blends all of those strokes together. All right, I'm going to shake off a little excess chalk, and then I'm going to blend it just a little bit more, and you can go on into that next color, that mango, a little bit if you'd like. But I'm going to use a sponge dauber on it as well and blend those two colors. And you can see how we've got our little horizon and sunset forming there. Now I'm going to take some Mossy Meadow and put a few strokes there. This is for the grass, making like a little meadow. I'm using a very light hand with this so that it's not too dark. Then I'm coming in with the Granny Apple Green to add some color. So if you've been around with Stampin' Up! A while, you probably remember when we had our pastels and little squares and so many colors. I think we had it for each of the colors in each color family. I may still have that palette of pastels somewhere, but it was fun to use, and these are fun to use as well. I decided to bring in a little bit more mossy to make that more defined. Okay, so there I have my background, and decided to go ahead and blend that a little bit more. So let's see a finished card with a technique such as this one. And here it is. I've used the little deer from Peaceful Deer along with those trees, and you can see how it made for a really pretty background with these images. And there we go. I used the little deer. I fussy cut that out and popped it up with dimensionals, and then stamped the trees on the outside. And you can see you have several sizes there you can use, and then used it for the inside of the card as well. Okay, I hope you will try that one. Now here's my favorite technique. It's called Poppin' Pastels, and you use it with Versamark and the chalk pastels. I have some basic white, and I'm using this image from Color and Contour stamp set from the annual catalog. And I've got it mounted on a clear block, and I'm going to just pounce my Versamark pad over top, inking that well. And then I'm going to stamp it on this piece of basic white. And although you can't see the image, I can barely see it. You may be able to see it there from the angle of the light. I'm taking Gorgeous Grape, a piece of scrap basic white, and I'm just going to scribble a little bit on here to put some color down. You could also scrape some off with your spatula little blade from the Take Your Pick tool, but I didn't have mine handy, so I just did this, made myself a palette. Now I'm putting some on the sponge dauber, and I'm just going to rub it over that Versamark image, and look at that, how that image just pops off the page, hence the name Poppin' Pastels. I love this technique. It makes such a subtle image, and it's so easy to do. I remember the very first year I was a demonstrator, I did several cards with a floral stem. I believe it was during Celebration, and I loved it, and I still do. So now we have Granny Apple Green, and I'm just going to go over the stems and the leaves. And you can see you don't have to worry so much about staying on the lines exactly, because it's such a subtle finish. It makes for a really pretty image. Now I'm going over those stems where I accidentally put some grape, and it works just fine. So now I'm just checking it out to make sure, brushing a little of the excess chalk off. And I got a little close to the top of that paper. I could have come down a little bit, but it still will work fine for another project. So I'm just brushing off some excess chalk here. Gonna blend a little bit more of the grape. Now let's look at a finished project. Here it is. I've got a gorgeous grape designer paper in the background with some strips of Granny Apple Green to bring out the stems and the leaves. I stamped the sentiment directly on the cardstock with the image, and it looks just fine. So I hope you will try some of these techniques with the soft pastels. They're really pretty, they're fun to use, and this is just the tip of the iceberg really with the techniques with these. These are just my favorites that I like to do. So thank you so much for joining me. Let me know if you have questions, and I will see you all again soon. Take care and have a great evening. Bye-bye.